2 days before my wedding, my parents pulled me into a small room at the church and gave me an ultimatum. "He's a retired mechanic," my dad said, straightening his cuffs. "He embarrasses us. Take him off the head table or we walk out of your wedding." That mechanic drove me to school every morning for 11 years. Rain or shine, engine running before my alarm even went off. My parents thought the worst thing that could happen at my reception was 200 guests watching a man with grease under his nails sit next to the bride. They were wrong. Because 2 days later, a stranger in a $5,000 suit stood up in the middle of my wedding, set down his glass and walked straight across that ballroom, and what he said didn't just shock my parents. It rewrote everything I thought I knew about my grandfather. I promise you, my parents never saw it coming. Honestly, neither did I. Welcome to Silent Revenge, where quiet people finally get their say. Hit subscribe right now because this story does not end where you think it's going. And drop your city and what time it is where you're watching. I read every comment. My name is Mia. I'm 28. Let me take you back to where this started. I was 6 the summer my parents moved from our hometown of Ardmore to Tulsa, Oklahoma. My dad had just landed a job at Falcon Logistics, a freight company with 10,000 employees and a glass tower he talked about like a cathedral. My mom went with him to start selling houses to people climbing the same ladder. I stayed behind with my grandfather, Sam Sullivan, because it was just for a year, sweetheart, until we get settled. 1 year turned into my whole childhood. Grandpa's house smelled like motor oil and strong coffee. He ran a small auto shop 3 blocks away, Sullivan Auto and Diesel, the kind of place where everyone trusted him more than the dealership. Every night when he locked that garage, he said the same 6 words like a prayer: "Leave it better than you found it." He said it when I dented his truck. He said it when I broke a fence. He said it so many times I stopped hearing it, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. My parents visited every couple months, but their visits felt more like inspections. My dad reviewed my report cards the way he reviewed sales numbers, hunting for the dip. And every time they left, my mom would glance back at Grandpa's tidy little house the exact way she looks at a house she wishes she could sell. I didn't have a word for that look when I was 9. I have one now. My dad, Gary, is 55, a VP at Falcon Logistics, and irons his weekend t-shirts. My mom, Denise, is 53, a top real estate agent with her face on a billboard downtown. They aren't cruel. There's something harder to explain. They keep score. Grades were points. Colleges were points. Job titles were the playoffs. When I was 22, I called to tell them I'd become a paramedic. My dad went quiet, then said, "And you're happy telling people that?" He never yells. He just quietly ranked me lower and moved on. But the strangest thing I noticed growing up was how my dad treated Grandpa. He didn't argue with him, he erased him. Company parties, holidays, the steakhouse dinner the year Dad made VP, Grandpa was never invited. Not once. I asked him about it exactly once at Thanksgiving. His face shut like a garage door. Some worlds shouldn't mix, Mia. That was the whole answer. It would take 4 more years, and my own wedding, to understand exactly what he was so afraid of. If you've ever watched a parent quietly erase someone who raised you, comment "I understand." Now let's get to the wedding. Jake proposed to me in the back of an ambulance bay, which tells you everything about him. He teaches history at the local high school and laughs at his own jokes half a second too early. One Tuesday in April, he was waiting by my rig at shift change with a ring box in his hand. I said yes before he finished the question. We wanted something simple, a small barn venue outside Broken Arrow, 200 guests, my grandfather at the head table. Then came the engagement dinner in Tulsa. After the salad, my dad slid an envelope across the table like he was closing a deal. Inside was a check for $35,000. "So it's done properly," he said. My mom squeezed my hand. "Think of it as staging, honey. Presentation is everything." I hesitated. I'd spent my whole life managing my parents. Some tired part of me thought, just take the check, keep the peace. So I said thank you and told myself it was a gift, not a vote. Then my dad slid over a second thing, a leather folder with a guest list. I opened it expecting cousins. Instead, I found a corporate org chart. 28 names I'd never shared a meal with, regional directors, 2 vice presidents, and underlined twice at the top, Robert Hale, CEO of Falcon Logistics. My wedding had become a business event. Took me a week of phone calls to understand why. Falcon's senior VP chair had just opened up, and my dad had spent 20 years positioning himself one rung below it. My wedding was the one place he could put a CEO and his own last name in the same room and call it family. So I did what I always did. I managed it, gave up the band, gave up my florist. Jake watched me give away my own wedding one phone call at a time and finally said gently, "You keep calling it their event." I laughed it off. Then the seating chart arrived. My mom emailed the chart on a Sunday night, color-coded, Falcon executives fanned around the dance floor. I found my grandfather, the man who taught me to change a tire in his driveway at midnight, at table 14. Back corner. Next to the kitchen door. Behind a support beam, exactly where the photographer's camera would never reach. I called my mom before I even finished scrolling. Grandpa raised me. He sits at the head table. She sighed the sigh she uses on buyers who want granite on a laminate budget. "Sweetheart, the head table is for the wedding party and the hosts. It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. I wrote that word down just so I'd stop hearing it. That evening I drove to Grandpa's. He was oiling his squeaky screen door because in his world a squeak is a moral failing. I told him about table 14, ready to be furious for both of us. He just wiped his hands on his rag and said, "I've sat in worse seats, kiddo. Don't burn your family down over a chair." That's my grandfather, 79 years old, and I had never once heard him fight for his own dignity. Never occurred to me that a man could be so sure of his own worth that he didn't need a room full of strangers to vote on it. Before I left, I noticed his good suit hanging fresh from the cleaners. Once a year, Grandpa puts on that suit and disappears downtown for what he calls his pension meeting. He came home that Thursday with a silver pen clipped in his pocket, engraved with a tiny compass. I remember thinking it looked expensive for a pension office. I didn't ask. If you want to understand my dad, picture a school cafeteria in 1983. My Aunt Renee let this slip over coffee while trying to talk me into flexibility on the seating chart. Gary was 12. Grandpa worked maintenance at the old Hargrove Freight Depot, and everyone at that small school knew it. One lunch period, some boys soaked a shop rag in the fountain and dropped it on my dad's tray. "Your old man missed a spot," one said. The whole table laughed. Gary didn't say a word. He walked home, threw the story at Grandpa, and begged him to get a different job. Grandpa, with a mortgage and 2 kids, said the only thing he knew how to say, "Work is work." My dad never forgave that sentence. He mowed lawns until he could afford clothes nobody could laugh at. He was the first Sullivan to finish college. He spent 30 years making sure no one could ever drop a rag on his tray again. I ached for a 12-year-old boy I never met. Then I remembered that boy was now 55, and the man he kept punishing was his own father. Comments still here if this is hitting close to home, and subscribe because next it gets worse before it gets better. That Sunday my mom texted, "Family meeting. Need to discuss presentation." The meeting had a slide deck. I wish I were joking. My dad clicked through a presentation titled Wedding Run of Show, ending on a slide called Seating Optics. Robert Hale seated 14 feet from the head table, every director with a clear sightline to my chair. 4 feet from the bride, my dad said. We'll have a retired mechanic in a Walmart suit. That's the story the company tells Monday morning. Grandpa sits at the head table, I said. My voice held, even if my hands didn't. My dad looked at me the way he looks at a number that won't add up. People remember the grease, Mia. Not the man. I picked up my keys. He called after me, calm as a weather report. Then you'd better hope nobody asks him what he did for a living. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I trusted my hands on the wheel. If you've ever had to explain why the person who actually raised you deserves a seat at your table, tell me below. And subscribe, because what a stranger did 2 days later still gives me chills. My mom doesn't argue. She campaigns. Within a week my phone was a switchboard, Aunt Renee with talking points, a cousin texting about keeping the peace, even our pastor getting a call about streamlining the family elements. By Friday I understood. My parents weren't lobbying for a seating chart, they were recruiting witnesses so my surrender would look like consensus. And it was working. When everyone tells you for a week that you're the unreasonable one, you start doing math on your own heart. Then Jake mentioned his mom got a call from mine about the right volume for the groom's side. My mother had gone after Jake's parents like a listing she was trying to close. That night I stopped doing math. That Sunday, Jake's parents invited us all to dinner, Grandpa included. I watched him walk into a house he'd never been in and get treated like a guest of honor, and realized I had never once in 22 years seen my grandfather relaxed at my own parents' table. On the drive home, Jake asked, the father-daughter dance. "What are you going to do?" "You only get one dad," I told him. He let it sit. Then, "Sure. And who taught you to dance?" I didn't answer. The answer was a kitchen in Ardmore, an old radio, and a 60-year-old mechanic counting 1, 2, 3, while a 9-year-old stood on his boots. The next morning I found out what our $35,000 had actually bought. I called our caterer about a menu swap and got a confused pause. "We'll need Mrs. Sullivan to approve that. She's the signer now." My mom had quietly re-signed the catering and photography contracts in her own name. It wasn't theft. It was neater than theft. Whoever signs decides. That night I sorted every wedding document at my kitchen table. Florist, theirs. Caterer, theirs. Photographer, theirs. And at the bottom the venue, deposit from my own account, one signature line. Mine. My parents had bought the flowers, the food, and the pictures. They had not bought the room. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Quick pause, if you're new here, welcome. Drop your city and the time right now wherever you're watching. And like this video because in a minute a locked drawer is about to change everything. The next morning I drove to Grandpa's to share my plan. Instead, he offered me his savings. "No strings," he said. I told him no. His only job was to wear his good suit, sit where I put him, and save me a dance. On my way out, I stopped at a hallway photo I'd walked past 1,000 times. A young man, unmistakably my grandfather, standing beside a big rig with Hargrove Freight painted on the door. He wasn't holding a wrench. He was holding a roll of paper, big sheets curled like blueprints, a pencil behind his ear. "Grandpa, what's this from?" He looked at it a long time. "I kept their engines running. And a few other things." Then he asked if I wanted pie, in the voice that means the subject is closed. I let it close. 3 weeks later, I'd remember that pencil. The next morning, I drove to Tulsa with my own envelope. I set it on my parents' kitchen island. Inside, their untouched $35,000 check and a typed page, what I was canceling and what I was keeping. The venue whose contract had my name on it. Every promise I'd already made to people I loved. My dad read the page like a resignation letter. My mom read the check like a death certificate. "You can't afford this wedding," she said. She wasn't wrong. I told her the new wedding would be one I could actually afford. Nobody yelled. My family doesn't yell. We just adjust the forecast. Comment Team Grandpa if you're still with me, because what happens at the rehearsal dinner flips this whole story upside down. That night I hand-lettered every place card myself, brown ink, and saved his for last. I set it on my windowsill where I'd see it every morning. Sam Sullivan, head table. Thursday, my dad's voicemail landed. 11 seconds, flat as a shipping manifest. "You're embarrassing us in front of the most important people in my career. Here's what a wedding looks like once you hand back $35,000. The band became a retired music teacher named Nora on the venue's old piano. The florist became garden roses cut from backyards on my old ambulance route because when neighbors hear your wedding lost its flowers, they start volunteering their gardens. Miss Odell, the school's retired cafeteria cook, took over the cocktail hour, and her food pantry crew baked like it was a mission. Was I sad? I keep checking that pocket and finding it empty. My mom was sad enough for both of us. Without us, it's a potluck, not a wedding, she said then in her closing voice. Your dad and I have been asking ourselves whether we can even attend something like this. There it was, the last card in the deck played casual. I hope you'll be there, I said. And I hated that I meant it. 2 days later, an RSVP card landed in my mailbox. Heavy cardstock, confident pen, Mr. Robert Hale accepts with pleasure. The CEO of Falcon Logistics was coming to my potluck. My dad had just invited the one guest he couldn't afford to be absent in front of. My dad called that Sunday with his negotiating voice on. Option A, Grandpa attends the ceremony, then skips the reception. Option B, he comes to the reception but sits at table 14, near the exit for his comfort, Mia. The man is 79. He doesn't dislike crowds, Dad, I said. He dislikes being hidden. Those are different things. A pause. Quieter now. You don't understand what one dinner can cost a man. He was closer to honest in that sentence than he'd been all year. But I looked at that little card on my windowsill and held the line. The seat is his, Dad. He exhaled through his nose. Then we'll see who shows up, he said and hung up. Like this video if you already know what's coming. And subscribe if you're new because the rehearsal is where everything cracks open. 2 nights before the rehearsal, I found Grandpa on his porch, gluing a shoe sole a reasonable man would have thrown out years ago. Don't lose your family over a chair, kiddo, he said. I can love you from any table in that room. You are my family, I said. You're the one who stayed. He went quiet, took off his glasses, and cleaned them on his shirt for a long time. Then he said, weather's turning. And I said, it sure is. My parents walked into the rehearsal 40 minutes early. My dad never arrives early out of enthusiasm, only to negotiate. The rehearsal itself went beautifully, my first warning. Then, while the wedding party ate lemon bars, my dad said, Mia! A word. Family only. My parents lined up like a closing team. My dad kept his voice low since the door was thin. We're asking one final time. Move Sam off the head table. Robert Hale will be 14 feet away. He's a retired mechanic, Mia. He embarrasses us. Then my mom pulled out the head table place card she'd found on the venue walkthrough, my brown ink lettering, Sam Sullivan, head table, and crumpled it. Absent-mindedly, the way you crumple junk mail, saying, we'll have it redone. It'll look intentional. In the doorway behind them, holding lemon bars on a napkin, stood my grandfather. He'd heard every word. I watched his spine straighten one bone at a time. I'll wait in the truck, kiddo, he said. No wobble in his voice at all, a man comforting his granddaughter while his own son called him an embarrassment through a half-open door. Comment still here if your hands are shaking a little too, because what happens in the next 60 seconds is the moment I stopped being anyone's translator. Something in me went quiet and organized. I stepped past my dad, picked the crumpled card out of the trash, and smoothed it flat against my knee, taking my time, letting the whole room watch. The seat is his. He's not on the table, Dad. He is the table. If you walk out tonight, that's yours to do. But then Saturday you come as guests. Regular guests. You tried to buy a better family for $35,000. When I handed the check back, you started spending relatives instead. The version you want isn't for sale. My mom recovered first. You're being dramatic. We'll revisit tomorrow. But my dad buttoned his jacket, the sign of a man ending a meeting that stopped going his way. Then enjoy your potluck, he said. They walked out and the door shut behind them with a boom. Into the silence, our pastor cleared his throat. So, who'll be walking the bride? Winning felt exactly like losing. There's no trophy for holding a line against your own parents. Just an empty parking lot, Jake's hand on my back, and an old truck cab that's the only place that's ever fully been mine. That night at Grandpa's, he brought out pie I hadn't asked for and my late grandmother's handkerchief. "Something borrowed," he said. Then, in the same tone he uses for weather, "I wasn't always just the mechanic, kiddo." But being the mechanic was never the part to be ashamed of. Your dad got that exactly backwards. I asked what he meant. He patted my hand and stood up. Conversation over. The door I turned. "Walk me down the aisle Saturday." He went still. "You sure you want these old boots creaking down an aisle?" That's a yes. Drop your city and the time right now and subscribe, because in about 2 minutes a CEO stands up and blows this entire family wide open. The Saturday of my wedding was one of those crisp blue October days. My parents were there, third row, dressed to the nines. I'd later learn their decision to come firmed up 11 minutes after word of Robert Hale's RSVP hit the office group chat. My grandfather stood beside me in his one good suit. "For luck," he said, tucking his truck key fob into his breast pocket. 40 years of locking up behind everybody. Figured tonight I'd walk somebody in for a change. "Don't you dare," I told my eyes. They did it anyway. The ceremony was short and true. Mine were one paragraph, and the man who taught me every word of them sat 6 feet away in the father of the bride's seat, and nobody had dared redo that card. 5 o'clock, our venue manager touched my elbow. "Mr. Hale's car just pulled in." My parents ran their whole event inside my potluck like it was their own. My dad steered Robert Hale from director to director. My mom herded photo-worthy guests into her chosen corner. 14 feet away sat the wedding I'd actually paid for. Jake's family, my college roommate, promoted off the bathroom table, and at my right hand a crease-scarred place card, "Sam Sullivan, head table." Then Robert Hale stopped listening to my dad mid-sentence. His eyes locked on the head table. He set down his glass. "Excuse me one moment," he said, and started walking. Straight across the ballroom. You need to understand the physics of a room like that. 200 guests, 40 minutes into dinner, and the most important man in the building suddenly walking with intent. Comment head table right now if you already believe my grandfather earned that seat. Conversation died table by table behind him. My dad stood stranded near the coat check, his hand still hovering over a shoulder that had walked away. Robert Hale passed the cake table, past the wedding party, past me with a small nod I couldn't read. My whole body went cold. He's about to say something about the mechanic. This is happening at my wedding. He stopped in front of my grandfather. Grandpa set down his fork, wiped his mouth, unhurried, and looked up with the calm face of a man who'd been expecting a bus he knew was coming. The whole ballroom had gone so quiet I could hear ice shift in someone's glass. If your heart is pounding right now, mine was louder, and I was standing in the middle of it with no idea what was coming. Robert Hale buttoned his jacket, held out both hands, and his voice carried to every corner of that ballroom without a single microphone. "Welcome back, Founder Sullivan." That was all. That was everything. The Falcon tables went from polite quiet to the electric silence of people doing math in their heads. "Founder. The bride is a Sullivan. The VP over there is a Sullivan." And the old man in the navy suit, with the crease-scarred place card in front of his water glass. I found my dad's face in the crowd. It went white, not pale wax white, the color of a man watching 30 years of arithmetic come apart in public. His wine glass tipped, and a director caught his elbow. My mom, one table over, had stopped moving entirely, her smile frozen while her eyes searched for the nearest exit. My grandfather shook Robert Hale's hand once, firmly, like a latch closing. "Robert, you're interrupting the salad course." The CEO laughed like a schoolboy, asked to join the table, and sat down across from Miss Odell, who poured him coffee like a woman who's fed too many important men to be impressed by one more. What the room got next wasn't a speech. Robert Hale gave my wedding 60 seconds of company history that exists in no brochure. In 1987, Hargrove Freight was 90 days from going under, and a depot maintenance man nobody had ever asked stayed late one night and redrew the entire regional routing system on the back of packing paper, the exact blueprint the company still runs on today. Dale Hargrove had the sense to listen. That maintenance man became a silent partner. When the company reorganized as Falcon Logistics, he kept 40% through a private holding company, took the title of Chairman Emeritus, and asked for one thing, that his name stay out of it. Dale wanted a self-made founder story for the customers, Hale said. And Sam wanted to be home for dinner. Both men got their wish. With Dale gone 7 years now, I figured that old promise had finally been kept long enough. I sit with him once a year, and every year he tells me the same thing, that every route this company runs was drawn by a man everybody walked past for years without ever seeing him. The silver pen with the tiny compass. Pencil behind his ear in that hallway photo. The yearly pension meeting downtown. Every odd sock in my memory paired itself up in about 4 seconds, and I grabbed Jake's arm just to stay standing. My mom was already dragging her chair over. By the time Hale sat back down, my parents were closing in on the head table wearing brand new faces. Comment unbelievable if you already know exactly what's coming, because their turnaround is the most human, most real part of this whole story. My mom appeared at Grandpa's elbow, laughing at a joke he hadn't told, calling him Dad, a word I had never once heard her use for Sam Sullivan in my entire life. Then my dad touched my arm. 1 minute. Please. Out by the coat check, he looked at me with the exact face I'd wanted my whole childhood, warm, open, 100% on me. You have to fix this. Talk to your grandfather about the senior VP chair. He listens to you, Mia. And after that, sweetheart, clean slate. We're a family again. 22 years I'd waited for my dad to call me sweetheart like that. It took a stranger's greeting to teach it to him in one night. I looked back at the head table, where my grandfather was calmly back on his salad. I felt the oldest muscle in my body flex, the fixer, the translator, the girl who smooths everything over. Here was the deal I'd been raised for. One conversation and I could have my whole family gift-wrapped. All I had to do was spend the seat my grandfather never asked for on the chair my dad never earned. No, I said. My dad blinked. Mia, you wanted a better table. He built the room, I said quietly, the way he'd taught me without meaning to. Then I walked back into my reception and left him standing there with his clean slate. What happened next took 90 seconds and cost me the last version of my childhood I'd been holding on to. I took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the father-daughter dance. Heads turned toward my dad in the doorway. I watched the room find him, wait for him to move. And I walked the other way, straight to the head table where I put out my hand, palm up, the way he taught me to offer sugar to a nervous horse. You've walked me through everything else, I said. Walk me through this one too, Grandpa. The room made a sound I can't spell. He glanced once at his son in the doorway, then Sam Sullivan pushed himself up and took my hand. Nora didn't play the scheduled song. She looked at Grandpa, got some tiny signal I'll never decode, and started What a Wonderful World on that old piano, slow and plain, the way it sounds in a kitchen. My grandfather dances like a man who learned it in a living room with a woman he loved. Small steps, sure frame, counting under his breath. I was 9 again, standing on his boots, crying into a navy lapel that smelled like motor oil and aftershave. I understood something during that song I'd been circling my whole life. I had spent 22 years believing that belonging to my family was a job with performance reviews. And the only person who never once made me apply for his love was the man whose hands were rough from wrenches and other people's engines. Belonging isn't wages. It's a gift, or it's nothing at all. I whispered into his lapel, Leave it better than you found it. His arm tightened half an inch. Old men don't sob. They compress. You just dig, kiddo, he said. When the song ended, he raised his water glass. To my granddaughter, said the quietest man I have ever loved, who never once asked what a person was worth before she loved them. 200 glasses went up. By the time the room settled, my parents' seats sat empty. They'd left without a goodbye. We cut the cake without them. Here's the accounting 3 months later. Grandpa offered to set up a trust for me. I told him no. I finally understood what he'd been doing for 30 years, quietly holding 40% of an empire out of a 2-bedroom house. The money was never the point of him. He did do one public thing with it that spring. The school district announced the Ruth Sullivan Scholarship, a full ride every year for the kids of the district's custodians, cooks, bus drivers, and groundskeepers. He made them promise not to put his face on anything. Nobody fired my dad. He still parks in the same spot, one rung below a chair he'll probably never sit in now. The story just got around. He emailed me in November. 2 lines, no subject. I didn't know. That's not an excuse. I've read it more times than I'll admit. I haven't answered yet. I don't owe it an answer on anyone's schedule but mine. We still do Sunday breakfast, 7:30, his kitchen. 2 weeks ago I caught him washing my coffee mug before I'd even finished it. I told him the room was already fine as I found it. He laughed until he had to sit down. On his windowsill, under a jar of pens, there's a small rectangle of cardstock with a crease scar down the middle. Brown ink. My best letters. He kept it. My grandfather owned 40% of an empire for 30 years and never once used it to buy a person. My dad chased a title for 30 years and nearly sold one. If you take anything from my wedding, take this. The seat of honor was never about what other man had. Dignity was never the name on someone's office door. It's what you leave behind in every room you're trusted to take care of. That's my story. A crumpled place card, a CEO on his feet, and one father-daughter dance that told the truth out loud in front of 200 people. If someone in your family ever mistook a title for a person's worth, tell me that story below. I read every single one. Drop your city, tell me what time it is right now, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one from Silent Revenge. See you in the next story.